Alright, so it's the year 25, the second millennium. It is the 7th month of July, and we are here to talk about how Games Workshop is min-maxing us Chaos players and Chaos lovers. Okay? Alright, so let me lay it down for y'all. We've currently got 4 of the Demon Primarchs now, and the 2 we have left missing are Lorgar and Perturabo. Now, based on a bunch of factors, it's safe to say that what's coming is going to be, at least combined or linked with Perturabo. And I think there are 3, really main factors as to why I would say this. First, is pretty obvious in that we have currently Vagstor, who's obviously this very important character when it comes to, demon engines and the technology focused part of Chaos. And there's 2 things about it. One is that in the lore, right, it fits very well. But more importantly, he's a great centerpiece model. And this fits very well into the Games Workshop kind of centerpiece focused army range formula. And this brings me to the second point, is that yes, this is the formula that they have been using for a while, and it's not a bad thing. But what we've seen and what we've gotten for the World Eaters and Emperor's Children is that it really feels like they've just taken this formula and they just put out the bare minimum of 5 or 6 new sculpts with some real good data sheets, and then they just chuck in some other generic units from the Chaos Space Marine faction. And there's no real way to sugarcoat this, but it just feels like there's a disconnect there, right? And we have been seeing this in the tournament army lists. So for World Eaters, prior to the most recent codex that just came out, it was pretty much every list was Angron, Exalted 8-bound, regular 8-bound, your Berserkers, and that's it, right? And same thing for the Emperor's Children. It was just, well, of course, the Daemon Prince really got a chance to shine. But aside from that, it's just the new strong data sheets, right? Now, currently, with the new World Eaters Codex, this has been, vastly improved, right? Because we're now seeing, at least there's 2 great archetypes of the army, right? We're seeing the Scarbrand list, and then we're seeing the Berserker list, right? And we're also seeing a bunch of Forge Fiends as well. And that brings me on to the third point, is that all these armies, they have their army-specific units, Plague Marines, Rubric Marines, 8-bound Noise Marines, etc., etc. But there's also a bunch of demon engines that have just been scattered throughout the entire, larger faction of Chaos as a whole. So my third point really is that this foundation for, whether they call it Dark Mechanicum, whether they call it Iron Warriors, or maybe it's going to be just some new umbrella that is going to take all of these demon engines, which have their uses and they have shined. You got the Forge Fiends, you got your Hell Brutes, then you got the Spider guys, and then you got the Spider Lord guy, and then you got Vagstor. That's a very good foundation that already exists for a new army range, especially one that is linked to, the Iron Warriors or the Dark Mechanicum, the technology side of Chaos. And this coincides with the fact that the Chaos Daemons are not receiving the Codex, even though their index rules are very strong right now in 10th edition. And when we look at the Death Guard, right, they have their own unique Daemon engines, and they're really cool, right? And thematically, in terms of their visual style, really matching that whole Nurgle kind of vibe. You know, you got your that artillery burst thing, and you got that kind of tripod thing with the teeth. And of course, I have to shout out, the All American Fetid Bloke drone. And man, they are great at the moment, seeing, a lot of play with the new detachment of Mortarin's hammer. So all of that combined, it feels like they want to move Chaos for 40K into more, of the sci-fi aesthetic, because you have the Great Horned Rat that came out for Age of Sigmar. That's the real first kind of, big leap where, they're making a distinction between how chaos is in the 40K universe and then the Age of Sigmar universe. And so to sum this all up, while this prediction may be obvious because there are so many kind of signs pointing in the direction of the Iron Warriors Dark Mechanicum, right? This is also a great opportunity for Games Workshop, right? Because I'm going to assume that moving forward, they will only plan to release a small number of new sculpts and units. And, as painful as it is, I think that's just gonna, that is the reality of it, because that's what we've seen recently, right? However, it is a great opportunity for them because of the foundation that they have, and that they could just release, 5 or 6 sculpts, maybe some characters, maybe a new demon engine unit, maybe even bring back the other demon engines like Soul Grinder and Defilers and stuff. And I think that the opportunity is that they can have this new faction, this new army range that is much more aesthetically cohesive and works together thematically. And I think rules wise, they've obviously set up this new vehicle kind of playstyle within Mortarian's hammer, as well as the use of demon engines, that's popped up more recently. But by unifying all the demon engines, and then, of course, the Lord Spider and the Vag Door, I think compared to the World Leaders and Emperor's Children, given that they already have a foundation of all these demon engines and technology and stuff, they don't need to release too much, and they'll have a very in-theme army, one that really feels like, all the units are relevant or appropriate, and just have a great new army range without too much work that'll be much better than what we got um, in World Eaters and Emperor's Children, which has really just been, very much focused on their new sculpts, new data sheets, and then everything else was just kind of tacked on somewhat arbitrarily, I'd say, for a lot of the units. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. I think this is going to be, this is a great setup, and they can really knock this out of the park, right? If you like this, well, I'm going to make another video about word bearers and Bellicor. I've been thinking about making these videos for a long time, but I kind of just never got around to it. And sometimes I would, I'd have these thoughts, and then bam, it happens. And so I was like, you know what? It's just time to put it out there. And the main motivator for this really is just to say that their approach to releasing a new range for the overarching faction of Chaos, they can't really use the template or formula that they do with just the loyalist Space Marines because of, the way the codexes work, the mix and matching of the generic units and all of that. Anyways, thanks y'all. Like and subscribe and all that shit. And remember, it's never a bad time to war some hams.